What happens when royalty meets reality? In a place with no crowns, no titles, and no script to hide behind. When the cameras start rolling and charm alone won't save the moment, something has to give. And this time, it did. Spectacularly. She entered the studio like she'd already won. Not with casual confidence, but with a quiet, deliberate control. Meghan Markle hadn't faced live television in years. And today, every producer in the building knew it. Whispers filled the green room long before airtime. George Stephanopoulos, a veteran of 1,000 interviews, presidents, prime ministers, power brokers, sat waiting. But he knew this one would be different. From the moment her appearance was confirmed, the team had rehearsed every second. Scripts reviewed, questions vetted, lines redrawn. Meghan took her seat, her poise impeccable. An elegant navy suit, her hair swept into a neat bun. Every detail seemed designed to project composure. The montage rolled. Applause filled the studio. Joining us this morning, George began smoothly, is someone who's been at the center of global conversations around family, fame, and fairness. Please welcome Meghan Markle, she smiled. Polite, practiced. Thank you, George, she said, her voice sweet but controlled. George leaned in. You've launched a new foundation, spoken about healing, transformation, and reshaping narratives. But some have argued... She raised a hand, interrupting with a soft laugh. George, I knew you'd start there. He didn't flinch. It's the headline, Meghan. Is it, though? She countered, tilting her head. Or just the easiest angle to frame me through? A subtle shift. Defensive already. Interesting. I'm asking, George continued evenly, because many viewers wonder about what's been called strategic victimhood. Her smile faltered for the briefest second. I'm here to talk about my work now, not to rehash tired narratives. I think we've all moved on, haven't we? George's tone cooled. Some might say the public hasn't had the chance to move on, because you haven't stopped talking. The podcast, the book, the docuseries. Let me stop you there, she said sharply. When women speak, we're accused of talking too much. When men interrupt, it's journalism. Let's call that what it is. A double standard. The double standard exists, George replied calmly. But deflecting criticism by citing gender alone isn't a defense. It's a tactic. And there it was, the first real crack. Her jaw tightened. So is this what we're doing? She asked. Cornering me under the guise of fairness? It's about clarity, he said. You've made strong claims, many unchallenged. Today we're offering dialogue, not monologue. Silence. When I spoke my truth, she said finally. I did it with grace. What others choose to distort isn't my responsibility. You say truth, George replied. But some facts have been disputed. For example, your claim that a royal expressed concern about your child's skin tone. When pressed for names or context, you refused. Doesn't accountability go both ways? Ah, she exhaled, leaning forward. You want names. You want scandal. That's what sells, isn't it? What sells, George said steadily, is honesty. If your mission is healing, shouldn't transparency be part of that? Her smile vanished. I came here for a conversation, she said tightly. Not a cross-examination. And I came here, George replied, for truth, not performance. The air cracked with tension. Words became weapons. Are you accusing me of being inauthentic? She demanded. I'm asking, he said, unwavering. If you're ready to be honest, or if this is just another chance to control the narrative. She crossed her arms. You're upset because I won't give you what you want. But I won't play that game, George. You don't get to define my story. Not you, George. Not your producers. Not the media you've served your whole career. Meghan said, her tone low but sharp. George tilted his head, calm but cutting. Isn't that exactly what you've been doing? Setting the tone for your own story while silencing anyone who dares to question it? For the first time, Meghan's velvet composure cracked. Her voice dropped. "I think we're done here." She looked off camera. "Walking away is easy." George said evenly, "Conversations only get hard when the truth starts to surface." Her chair scraped softly against the floor as she stood. The studio froze. Her breath held in collective silence. A producer whispered off stage, but Meghan didn't move. She leaned just close enough for the microphone to catch her next words. "You think you're the truth teller here?" she hissed. "You've built a career on sanitized scripts. Don't confuse control with courage." Then, with one last look toward the camera, she turned and walked off set. George didn't move. He sat there, still as stone, the silence screaming louder than anything she'd said. Around him, the crew didn't breathe. Camera operators frozen, producers wide-eyed, the control room a wall of blinking lights and disbelief. Meghan Markle had just stormed off live television. 3 long seconds passed before George adjusted his jacket and looked straight into camera one. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The expression on his face said it all. "Should we cut to commercial?" A voice whispered in his earpiece. "Not yet," he murmured, eyes fixed forward. Then, a voice echoing from offstage. "Meghan." The cameras weren't on her anymore, but the audio feed was still live. "You knew exactly what you were doing bringing me here," she called out. This wasn't a conversation. This was a setup. George turned slightly, his tone calm but firm. "No, Meghan. A setup is when you decide the outcome before the questions are even asked. That's not what happened here." She stepped back into the edge of the frame, her polished mask gone, replaced by raw, visible anger. "Don't pretend you're some impartial referee," she snapped. "You've built your career off access. Now you bite the hand that fed you the headlines." George leaned back, unshaken. "Access isn't accountability. You sat here and refused to answer a single direct question. Not about your claims, not about your contradictions. And when pressed, you walked out. I won't let you put me on trial for speaking my truth." She shot back. "I lived what I lived. I won't let anyone edit that to fit your belief system." He rose slowly, not to confront, but to meet her at eye level. The distance between them felt electric. "This isn't about policing your story," he said. "It's about truth, and whether your version of events stands up when someone dares to ask hard questions. If it can't, maybe it's not as solid as you think." She laughed, short, bitter. "You want truth? Fine. You want names, drama, fire. That's what gets ratings, isn't it? I came here trying to take the high road, but maybe you only recognize authenticity when it bleeds." George's reply came crisp, controlled. "High roads don't come with camera crews and press releases." She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "Careful, George. You're starting to sound like the tabloids you claim to rise above. And you," he said evenly, "sound like someone who mistakes criticism for cruelty." The tension wasn't performance anymore. It was war, quiet, intelligent, and impossible to look away from. "We need to cut," a producer whispered urgently. "We're still live." George raised a single finger. "Not yet." Meghan's voice softened, not broken but defiant. "You think I'm afraid of this? Of you? You're just another man in a suit holding me to a standard no one else has to meet. And you," he said, "are just another public figure who thinks being questioned is the same as being attacked. Do you know how many guests have sat in that chair?" he continued, "faced tougher questions, and stayed. They didn't flinch. They didn't fold." She stared him down. "So I flinched?" He met her gaze. "You fled." For a long, heavy beat, neither moved. Then Meghan exhaled sharply. "You came into this with your mind made up. You're not interested in hearing me. You're interested in proving you're right. You're not interested in hearing me," Meghan said, her voice low, tight. "You're interested in breaking me." George replied quietly, "I'm interested in seeing whether the version of you the world keeps hearing actually exists." She didn't answer, but the look she gave him, disbelief, offense, and something deeper, something wounded, said more than words ever could. A junior producer hesitated near the edge of the set, headset askew. "Should we cut to weather?" she whispered. George didn't respond immediately. He studied Meghan, her poise barely holding, and then turned to the producer. "No," he said finally. "Let's finish what we started." He gestured to the chair. A pause. Calculation flickered behind Meghan's eyes, pride wrestling with principle. Then, with visible restraint, she stepped forward and sat down again. The smile was gone. The performance was gone. Only resolve remained. "Ask your next question," she said, voice sharp but steady. George sat too, opening his notebook without breaking eye contact. He turned the page slowly, deliberately, letting silence stretch until it became part of the tension itself. Meghan's posture was rigid. One hand gripped the armrest, the other rested on her knee, her face unreadable but her gaze unflinching. "No more dancing around it," she said flatly. "If you have something to say, say it." George leaned forward slightly. "You've spoken often about being silenced," he began. "Yet you've had more platforms than almost anyone in the past 5 years. That's not an attack. It's a fact. So I'll ask plainly, how does someone silenced also become the loudest voice in every room?" Meghan's lips parted, then pressed closed again. "You don't understand what being silenced means," she said quietly. "It's not about airtime. It's about consequence. About what you're allowed to say without being destroyed for it." He met her gaze. "Is it really consequence if people are just asking for clarification? Or is it discomfort when you're not in control of the narrative?" "You say that like I haven't paid a price," she shot back. "Like every word I've spoken hasn't come with a cost." "There's always a cost to influence," George said evenly. "But the real question is, did you earn it through truth, or by mastering the art of framing it?" Her voice sharpened. "And who decides that? You?" "No," he said softly, "but the public does. And they're still waiting for answers." Meghan's jaw tightened. "You're trying to make this about my credibility," she said, picking apart my every word. "Would you do this if I were someone safer?" "I've done it with senators," he replied instantly. "With CEOs, with friends. The only thing I don't do," he paused, "is play favorites." She didn't blink. "You've read the headlines. You know what happens when I speak. The mockery, the twisting. You want me to bare myself for your cameras, while you dissect my humanity like a legal brief." George shook his head slowly. "No, I want accountability, and that's not the same thing." A long silence followed. Meghan studied him, searching for cracks, any sign of weakness, but found none. Finally she exhaled. "Fine," she said quietly. "You want clarity? I'll give you clarity." She leaned in, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "Yes, there were conversations about my child's skin tone. No, I won't say who. Because the point was never one person. It was the culture, the silence that followed. The institution that treated me like a threat just for existing." George nodded slowly. "You realize that without specifics, people question the truth of it. Vague accusations invite skepticism. And specifics," she said coldly, "invite danger. For me, for my children." His voice softened, but the edge remained. "So the solution is implication without evidence?" A flicker crossed her face, hurt, defiance, fear. She caught herself before it showed too much. "You're trying to corner me into fitting your format," she said. "But life doesn't play out like a deposition." "No," he agreed. "But truth still works like truth. And right now you're asking for belief without scrutiny." She inhaled sharply. "I didn't ask to be believed," she said. "I asked to be heard." George tilted his head. If people hear you, and then question what they heard, are they wrong? Or are they just thinking critically? The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Meghan finally spoke, voice breaking slightly around the edges. You're not interested in my experience, George. You're interested in tearing it apart until there's nothing left to believe in. He folded his hands. I'm interested in whether what you call your experience lines up with facts. Because stories matter, Meghan. He paused, eyes steady on hers. But truth matters more. She held his gaze, unblinking. Maybe your truth and mine were never meant to match. The problem, George, Meghan said evenly, is that you still think facts and truth are the same thing. He paused, studying her face. Tell me what that means, she hesitated. Facts are data points. Truth is what you live. It's not a spreadsheet. It's the weight behind your choices, the way a room changes when you walk in, the tone behind words that pretend to mean something else. You want names and timelines, but this story's bigger than that. It's about patterns, power, silence. That's the truth I lived. George nodded slowly. That may be your truth, but that doesn't make it the truth. Her eyes narrowed. And that distinction right there. That's how people like you discredit voices like mine. He leaned forward slightly. No, that's what people like me use to separate storytelling from journalism. For the first time, her composure faltered. Not much. Just enough to reveal the exhaustion beneath the poise. I came here thinking you might understand, she said quietly. That maybe someone with your background would get it. His voice softened, but only slightly. And I thought you'd be ready to go beyond rehearsed grievances, she flinched. Rehearsed? I think it's strategy, he said. And strategy isn't dishonest, but it's not the same as truth. Silence hung heavy between them. The control room didn't dare cut away. George took a slow sip of water, then looked up. We can stop here if you'd like. Meghan shook her head. No, you wanted the real version of me? Then let's keep going. The air thickened. George leaned in, forearms on the desk. You said you wanted to continue. So let's talk about control. Her brow lifted, guarded curiosity flickering. Control? You've said the media tried to control your image, that the institution tried to control your voice. But from the outside, he said, it looks like you've tried to control every room you walk into. The tone, the script, even the questions. She gave a quiet, humorless laugh. Is that a crime now? A woman wanting control over her own story. It's not a crime, he said. But when you demand accountability from others, you have to accept it for yourself. Otherwise, it stops being a conversation and starts being a monologue. Meghan crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. What you call control, George, I call survival. I don't get to walk into rooms and just be. Every word I say is dissected. Every gesture becomes a headline. So yes, I manage the message. But that's not manipulation. That's necessity. He nodded slightly, conceding a fraction. But not the point. You're right, he said. But sometimes managing the message means losing its meaning. You want people to see you as vulnerable, as honest. But every word feels polished, protected. Her tone cooled. Would you prefer I cry on cue? Unravel on live TV so you can claim you got the real me? No, he said firmly. I'd prefer truth that doesn't flinch when pressed. Her expression hardened. The truth, George, is that you don't want honesty. You want confession. You want surrender. I want clarity, he countered. And accountability. You have massive influence. And when someone with your reach tells a personal story, it doesn't just shape perception, it shapes consequences. Her eyes narrowed. So now I'm responsible for how people react to my story, I think. George said, his voice unwavering. You're responsible for what you choose to leave out. The silence that followed was heavier than before. She stared down at her hands, then up again. You know, I used to admire you, she said. Thought you were one of the good ones." "I'm not here to be admired," he replied. "I'm here to ask the questions no one else will." "And if I don't answer them the way you want," she asked, "then I'm evasive, dishonest?" "No," he said quietly. "But if you dodge every uncomfortable truth, you can't expect people to see you as credible." That one landed. Her eyes dropped for the first time. After a long breath, she said, "I came here to talk about healing, about what I'm doing now. And you dragged me back into the muck." George's tone was calm. "Healing doesn't come without truth, and truth doesn't come without confrontation." "You keep saying truth like it's absolute," she shot back. "But all you've done is challenge my version without ever considering the weight of what I lived." "I have considered it," George said. "But I've also considered the people you've described. People who never had the platform you do. The ones you've criticized without giving them a chance to respond." "I didn't name anyone," she said defensively. "No," he replied. "But you implied everyone. You built a castle out of shadows and let the world fill in the faces." She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, stripped bare. "Maybe I did that because I didn't think anyone would listen if I told the full story. Maybe I thought they'd twist it anyway." George nodded slowly. "Maybe that's fair. But when you speak in half-truths, don't be surprised when people come looking for the rest." Meghan looked down, then back up. "You got your moment," she said softly. "You dragged me into a fight I didn't ask for. But don't mistake this for a victory." "This isn't a victory," George said, standing. "It's a reckoning, and that doesn't belong to me. It belongs to whoever decides what comes next." She stood too, smoothing her jacket. Her voice was calm now, almost eerily so. "I'm not broken, George, and I'm not ashamed. If anything, you just reminded me why I stopped trusting interviews like this. And I'm not apologizing," he said evenly, "because this wasn't an ambush. It was a mirror." They stood there, silent, steady, unyielding. Neither blinked, neither spoke first. Then George turned to the camera, not smug, not victorious, just unshaken. Meghan walked off the set for the second time. But this time, she didn't look back. The camera lingered. The tension didn't dissolve. It just went quiet, and that was the moment the broadcast cut to commercial. But you, watching now, saw something rare. Not the performance, not the press release, but the unvarnished collision between image and inquiry, between control and confrontation. What do you think? Was Meghan Markle challenged unfairly, or finally asked what no one else dared to? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that go deeper than the headlines.